Welcome to Wizard Jail, Episode 1. I'm one of your hosts, Patrick Ripoll.
And I'm Gabe Powers. This is all my fault.
Yeah, this is a podcast, a rewatch podcast about the cartoon Visionaries and general podcast about the property outside of the cartoon as well. Gabe, why are we doing this?
It goes back to an in-joke that only my closest in real life friends would even know, and I don't think Patrick even knew this, where I would pretend that I was frustrated with stuff and that I was just going to go off and instead of reviewing movies, I was just going to review episodes of Visionaries. Instead of doing a podcast, I was going to do a podcast about Visionaries. And I made that joke, and Patrick just said, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I didn't realize that was an inside joke for you. My thing is that whenever we get into a conversation about like forgotten cartoons or whatever, I never remember the name of Botsmaster. And we've had this conversation like 5 times, and each time I'm like, yeah, there was one I was watching. It was like a boy, and there were all these robots that had bombs, and there was like a baseball robot. And you go, yeah, the intro for that one's crazy. I go, really? And I look it up, and then I go, oh, we've had this conversation 4 times before. Now I remember Botsmaster.
Yes, this is not a Botsmaster podcast, but look at the opening of Botsmaster. It's like you're having an anxiety attack.
It is like I have ADHD, and I think it's because of the French. I think it's the Botsmaster's fault for watching that at a young age. But whenever I would bring up Botsmaster, you would bring up Visionaries, and I would always go, "Oh yeah, I've never heard of anyone mention Visionaries either." I think I was in a playful kind of a mood when you said I should just do a Visionaries podcast. I said, "All right, fine, let's do it." And here we are.
So I'm going to give a little bit of context here. When I was growing up, my mother had been an early child care expert since she was like 16. She actually dropped out of high school and went straight to college to learn about early child care. And the truth of the matter is that it is not healthy for children under the age of 5 to watch television no matter what. Like even Sesame Street is kind of bad for them. And it's not I'm not judging anyone who does that, because if I had kids, I would definitely throw them in front of a screen all the time. And it's not like it's rotting their brains. But because my mom was an expert in these things, she had me convinced that the television only worked when Mr. Rogers was on and when the news was on. And I finally realized that I had control over my own life, and that my parents slept in on weekends, so I would get up and watch cartoons on Saturday and Sunday mornings. And so I came late to most of these cartoons, so I didn't watch the usual stuff for people my age. I wasn't allowed at all to watch or play with G.I. Joe's, Transformers, or He-Man. Those all passed me by. Those were all things that seemed cool, and my friends would have the toys, but I didn't really ever know anything about them. So what really became a weird thing for me was Sunday morning cartoons, which is something a lot of people don't talk about, because a lot of them were only on cable, and at the very least they were syndicated, and they were also a weird in between age. So they're like me, they're not quite Gen X and not quite millennial. They're just sort of in between those two things. And so I used to watch something called USA Network's Cartoon Express block. And they had shows like the shows that people remember and people who do remember are really fond of. Dino Riders, Sky Commanders, RoboCop. There was a single episode of X-Men that was a pilot that didn't get picked up called Pride of the X-Men.
That's right. They did do a aborted X-Men before the Fox came
And
along.
on the block I used to watch, RoboCop had one less episode than all the others, because there's basically 13 episodes that they just keep rerunning forever. But RoboCop only had 12 episodes. So when you got to episode 13, then you'd get to watch Pride of the X-Men. So anyway, I had it in mind that was where I watched Visionaries, but I did all this research, and apparently Visionaries was not on USA Network. And I found that I found there's a website that actually tells you where certain shows. That's how obsessive people are, and God bless them for it. That they tell you what channels things were syndicated on, and it turned out it was syndicated on a non-cable UHF channel back in Tucson when I was a kid. And I found out that the channel was actually run by the Diocese of Tucson, so it was intended to be a family channel. Which, in retrospect, Visionaries being a show about their gods and magic and witches and shit is kind of funny, because when I got older, then suddenly Harry Potter was Satan shit and magic cards were Satan shit. So the idea that the Catholic Church of Tucson was like, oh yeah, throw that on, we don't care, as long as it's
Even in a sense of like teaching lessons about good and evil, Visionaries is a little more ambivalent than I think the Archdiocese of Tucson would approve of.
Yes, exactly. It was KTTU 18, which it was called the Family Channel. Then it was bought out and eventually became, I believe, UPN. So I thought I was watching cable, but I was a stupid child, so I wasn't actually watching cable. I was just on the cable box. I want to set the record straight here and that I do have nostalgia for this, but I am not one of those people who can't recognize how awful television, children's entertainment in particular, was when I was a kid. That cartoons are way better now. Like you go back and basically Batman the Animated Series, and then to a certain degree X-Men and Animaniacs sort of is a turning point. Early Ghostbusters is the thing here is that this is like a double nostalgia for me because I watched them as a kid, and then when I first got sick, I don't know if everybody knows, I had a Hodgkin's lymphoma, and when you do the first treatment, the easier one, it makes it so you sleep a lot the days of the treatment, and then you just can't fucking sleep. And my grandparents were nice enough to pay for my cable television as a sort of reward for getting cancer.
Hey,
and
this cancer thing sounded all right.
And I think it was the early Boomerang channel. It was one of these channels that was on the end of the cable dial in 2004 and 5 that reran all these shows I used to watch. And so I rewatched them. And then at around the same time, a bunch of them hit DVD, and that's when I started writing about DVDs. So I requested them. And I even got to the point where I was if you've ever been to a comic or horror convention, frankly, between the years 2000 and I would say 2015, there's always a guy, and it's always the same guy no matter what city you're in, and he's selling stacks of bootleg DVDs of like pilots that were never aired and TV shows that don't exist anymore. So I ended up buying some of those just so I could relive all these childhood memories because, I was in a bit of a dark place and I couldn't sleep at night. And all of it really sucks. Except for the obvious ones, Batman, etc. But Visionaries was so different in weird ways because it was exactly the same as everything else. But then there was just little things about it. There's not a lot of research you can do on this show, but there was an interview with the main guy who I'll introduce later, who basically said that the studio was closing down, so they were kind of left to their own devices. And you can tell. And it's just something, and I think that it's a unique it's a good idea for a show in the day and age of rebooting everything. I mean, some of those reboots, like I have to say, the Thundercats reboot from the mid 2000s is actually a pretty decent show, and at least two of the Ninja Turtles reboots were actually pretty decent shows. There's room for rebooting this stuff, and I'm just sort of a little part of me sad that Visionaries wasn't rebooted because I think there is the core element for a decent, teenage aimed science fiction fantasy television series.
Yeah, when you think about like the ideal form of Visionaries, you're kind of thinking about like that late Warner Brothers kids, like Justice League Unlimited level of like, we are taking ideas sort of seriously, but we also understand these are action shows. You can tell interesting stories about this world.
Yeah, and it had cool toys, and I think we agreed we're going to talk about the toys kind of at the end of all things of this whole series. But the toys were very cool, and for whatever reason, my mom let me get them. I think they didn't because they didn't have guns; they had like clubs and swords.
We will talk about the toys and in general the character designs a little later. But I would say the thing that makes me not find them appealing is probably the things that would make them more appealing to a parent who's worried about how they're introducing violence into their kids' play life. Just so everyone knows, I think the general shape of this podcast is going to be 8 episodes. The first 7 episodes we're going to be sort of covering the history of this show and then going through all the episodes, recapping them, talking about them, and then the final episode we'll be talking about the comics and the toys.
Right. And yeah, there's only 13 episodes. They're all on YouTube if you want to watch them. In fact, they're not just on YouTube. Various people have them on YouTube if you want to like...
No one is claiming these.
If you're up...
It is open season on Visionaries.
If you're up for like comparing video quality of whose old VHS tape looks better, they're all over the place. Let me start with what the backstory, what Visionaries is here. Its full title is Visionaries, the Knights of the Magical Light. And it was an animated TV series that ran in syndication for 1 season, 13 episodes between September 20th and December 13th of 1987. It was created by Flint Dill. I think it's Dill. It might be Delay. Should I say Delay? D-I-L-L-E?
Say Dill.
Okay. He's from Chicago. Hey, Chicago boy. He is the grandson of...
Like a dill pickle on a
He's
Chicago dog.
Chicago dogs? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Phil, Dill, here comes Dill.
Here comes Dill, I understand. That's my favorite word in the Chicago accent.
The way you orient your Chicago accent is Joe Pantoliano
Is Joe Pantoliano inbound? Yes, I understand. Oh, I love it. I love the Chicago accent. It's better than the Minnesota accent. As an outsider to the Midwest, I prefer the Chicago.
They're definitely the tops of the Midwestern accents.
Yeah. Wisconsin's like sort of Minnesota, but down a little bit, I gotta say. A little nasally. And nobody likes the Dakotas. Sorry, guys. I don't know what Michigan's accent. I was just in Michigan, and I don't know. I don't think they really...
There's probably some sort of Detroit accent.
There's gotta be. There's definitely a Toronto accent. I learned that. But anyway, sorry, off topic. Mr. Dill, he was the grandson of John F. Dill, the original publisher of the Buck Rogers comic strip, and he is part of the family trust that owns the character. So he is a Nepo baby, and his money outside of his work he's done, which is a lot of work, is tied to this ancient property, Buck Rogers, which I think is kind of cool because there's a little bit of Buck Rogers in Visionaries. He worked for Ruby Spears Production, which was founded by Joe Ruby and Ken Spears after they left Hanna-Barbera. The company was part of Filmways, which was bought out by Orion Pictures in the 80s, around the time when this show would have been on. But this was not a Ruby Spears production. He moved on to what is called Sunbow, a production company behind all the greats, the big ones, G.I. Joe, Transformers, Inhumanoids, Gem and the Holograms, My Little Pony. And then in the 80s, they were still around. They did The Tick, which was actually pretty funny. I've rewatched some Tick episodes, one of my nostalgia fests. And the Mask animated series, which unfortunately is nothing like the Mask comic book. There's not a lot of bloody mayhem. He was part of the Sunday Morning Development Team, all in caps. He ended up acting as writer, story editor, co-producer on several of these shows. He apparently included uncredited rewrites on Transformers, the animated movie. So I feel like that would be his biggest ticket item there, is that he worked on the Transformers movie, because that has huge nostalgia value. That's something that gets re-released on home video every 2 years. It's kind of an obnoxious movie, though. just to know where I'm coming from with these things, I find that movie kind of annoying. But he also worked at CBS and Amblin, where he wrote... Oh, I'm sorry. This is his big ticket item. He wrote An American Tale, 5-0 Goes West, which is the sequel to An American Tale that takes place.
Disney killer.
The big Disney killer, yep. And then he also did rewrites on the, maybe this Disney killing shit isn't working movie, We're Back, A Dinosaur Story.
Was that Don Bluth, too?
It was Don Bluth's studio. I don't know if it was Don Bluth who actually did it.
I did watch We're Back when I was growing up because I loved Whoopi Goldberg. I was obsessed with Sister Act, and anything with Whoopi Goldberg in it I watched.
It had 4 directors, none of which were Don Bluth. I actually owned because I was a big dinosaur kid, I actually owned the picture book that it was based on. Okay, but wait, there's more. Later, he also worked with TSR and Gary Gygax on various projects, including books, role-playing games, and an attempt to adapt various properties into screenplays. He actually co-wrote a never-produced Dungeons & Dragons movie. So not either of the two that made it to theaters, obviously. Gary Gygax and TSR being the Dungeons & Dragons people. He wrote video games. He won an award for his plotting on the Chronicles of Riddick Escape from Butcher Bay, which I've never played, but I heard is a pretty good Riddick movie that you just play, like a short film that you play.
Yeah, that is a game that was doing very interesting things in the first-person shooter space for consoles, where interesting things were rarely being done. So that is still a well-regarded game. It got like a remaster, even a re-release, not because people love Riddick, but because people like the game.
I'm sure somebody out there loves Riddick, other than Vin Diesel.
Yeah, Vin Diesel.
Dill was also friends with Frank Miller, which we won't hold against him. One of the characters in Frank Miller's 300 is named after him. I never knew that. They tried to do a Sin City video game, And then when that failed to happen, they tried to combine to do a Buck Rogers movie, which also didn't happen. His last credit is the 2005 horror movie Venom, which is not to be confused with Venom, the movie about the snake, or any of the Venom movies about the comic book character Venom. I didn't see this. It looked like a slasher movie, like a sort of backwoods slasher type thing. I'm not sure.
Okay, I can see the cover, but I was definitely thinking you were talking about the snake movie.
Nope, some movie nobody's ever seen from 2005, which ironically is probably when I was rewatching Visionaries.
And this is when I was working at Blockbuster, so that's probably why I can picture the DVD cover in my mind.
Visionaries was a co-production between Sunbow and TMS Entertainment in Japan. TMS had been in the animation business since the 60s. Some of its better known shows, at least here in the US, I'm sure its reputation in Japan is different, includes Moonin, which is a Finnish-based series based on a Finnish comic strip character. I believe he's I think he's a comic strip character, not a children's book character. I'm not going to look it up. I apologize to all my Finnish and other European fans.
They're so happy over there. We can get anything about their culture wrong, and
we're
totally
just
fine
mentioning Moonin, and Moonin's like a little kind of hippo-looking guy. It's very cute.
They just threw a parade in Finland because someone mentioned Moonin.
Yeah. Lupin the Third, which is...
That's right. Hayao Miyazaki used to work at TMS.
Yes, he did. On Lupin the Third and on Sherlock Hound.
That's right.
And they also did Detective Conan, which is ongoing. Like, very popular show. Like, the city where it takes place has a statue of him. And I think that it's a new series is coming to Netflix. I think I saw that on the coming soon to Netflix. Detective Conan is like Dragon Ball. It just never goes away. They just keep on doing more of it. It's about an adult trapped in a child's body, I think. I can't remember if he's trapped in a child's body or he's just a really smart child, but he's a detective kind of character. It's better than it sounds from what I'm describing. In the 1980s, TMS co-produced shows that ended up in America, usually in syndication. It included Ulysses 31, which was done with French-American studio DIC, Deke Entertainment, I think is a thing that people remember for, let's say, the real Ghostbusters, Rainbow Bright.
Captain Planet, I think is the one I always saw it with.
The big one was Inspector Gadget.
Oh, sure.
The Alf Show, which was really bizarre. Heathcliff and the Cadillac Cats, which has the absolute brain-wormiest theme song. It's even more brain-wormy than the DuckTales theme. Have you ever heard the Heathcliff theme?
I have thankfully avoided this.
Oh my God.
It has not burrowed into my soft tissue yet.
It's like a song that has a key change at the end. And in hell, I imagine that the key change just keeps going up and the song never ends. You'll have to listen to it later. I don't want to sing it for you.
Right.
Also, Kissy Fur, which I've never seen, but I always thought sounded like the worst, most disgusting, horrible thing ever. And yeah, there was I think I already mentioned the Littles. Those were all things. So that was between Japan and French American studio. So that's 3 countries. There was something called the Mighty Orbots that they did with MGM in America. The aforementioned Sherlock Hound was actually co-produced with an Italian company called Ray. And then there was Cyber 6, which was done with a Canadian company called Network of Animation. And then for Disney's, they did DuckTales, Chip 'n Dale, Gummy Bears, and Gargoyle. Oh, and also they worked for Warner Brothers after that, doing Tiny Toons, Batman, Superman, and Pinky and the Brain. They're the shit. They're like, TMS is the Japanese studio who all American kids of the 80s and 90s saw their work, basically.
So at this point, I do want to say the reason I'm on this podcast, I think, is because I have recently developed this sort of hyperfixation with animation. I've always loved animated shows and stuff like that, but I've just recently, I think, as a coping mechanism for the world around me,
that was
I've just been like really.
I mean, that's part of the reason I was watching cartoons because I would have anxiety attacks. So when I was in college, I had a tape of Simpsons and Batman episodes that I had taped as a kid.
And part of this hyperfixation has been me listening to a ton of this very good podcast called What a Cartoon It's hosted by Bob Mackey and Henry Gilbert, and they go into like the histories of different shows, and they'll review an episode and stuff like that. And like when we were talking about how we were going to do this podcast, most of my ideas were just sort of like, well, we could just do what they do on What a Cartoon. And so they will talk about, they have, you know, they know a ton about animation and stuff, and they will talk a lot about the history of these different studios and about TMS, and like, you know, different overseas studios had different levels of quality, and, you know, that level of thing. So I have all this like sort of background context in my head from listening to so much of that over the course of the last like 3 weeks. Do you know why TMS suddenly was doing all these American TV shows?
I don't know what the inciting event was. No.
The inciting event was Little Nemo Adventures in Slumberland.
Well, that was on my list of things I was going to mention. So awesome.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, in Japan, they worked on a lot of movies, including Lupin the Third, Castle of Cagliostro, which is known as Hayao Miyazaki's feature film debut. And there's a Golgo 13, The Professional, was a 1983 adaptation that they did that was really big when I was in like high school and middle school, because it was one of those, quote, adult anime or Japanimations, as they called them back then, that made it to home video, and you could watch the whole thing. It wasn't like a lot of those videotapes had 3 episodes if it was a TV show, and like, for instance, Ranma 1/2, I only could watch 6 episodes because the video store only ever got tapes 1 and 2. So movies were better because you get the whole story. And then, they did Little Nemo and Slumberland, which had a decent size U.S. release as far as I know, but was a much bigger hit in Europe and Asia.
But more importantly, cost so much money that it did not really make its money back.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
And so because they basically put all their chips down on Little Nemo and Slumberland, making them like an international force like Disney.
Right.
And when that didn't happen, they suddenly had to take on a lot of extra work. And that is sort of how you get this Western American like animation renaissance in 1987 with shows like DuckTales and stuff like that, and Batman the Animated Series and all these things. It's because these really, really talented animators who are used to doing much more complicated stuff than children's cartoons were sort of taking on all this work.
And you can, I haven't listened to a lot of audio commentaries, but I listened to the ones on all the available ones on the Batman the Animated Series. And the way they talk about TMS and the other companies they worked with, eventually it moves to Korea because Japan becomes too expensive for the American studios. Another thing that happened later in the 2000s and 2010s is that the people making these shows put effort into getting to know the animators they were working with in Korea and Japan. I know that that's famously why Avatar: The Last Airbender is so much better than a lot of the others, especially as it went on into second and third season, is because the 2 creators, and they would go to Japan or to Korea and hang out with the guys and talk to them, and they tell stories about how it's not a sweatshop, but the Korean animators were so proud of what they were doing that they were like being chased out of the studio to like go home, because they were just like, this is such an important show. And so that made a big difference. But back in the 80s, they're just sort of the people that you are outsourcing to, and I don't think that a lot of the American studios really understood what they had. I think they just knew it was cheaper than doing it in America.
That is true. Yeah, no, it's definitely, there are different labor laws that make that sort of animation much cheaper overseas.
I should also say TMS also was one of the many animation houses that worked on Akira, which is like the most important Japanese animated film as far as Western audiences are concerned.
Right. So Visionaries being a show that debuts in 1987, it really is like, this is
a year before.
I don't want to say like, oh yeah, so it's as good as Akira. It's like, clearly there are priorities, and Akira takes priority over this toy commercial show. But like, these are like basically the same people who are doing DuckTales, who are doing Akira, are doing all the animation for Visionaries.
The studio still does. They just do Tsukamoto Days, which is cute. That's on Netflix. I don't know if anybody else watches that. It's about a sort of like, it's like John Wick, but if John Wick retired and fell in love, retired, and got fat and ran a convenience store.
That sounds
It is
cute.
cute. It's very cute. And they do Dr. Stone, which I've never watched, but people really seem to like. And then at the studio, every episode of Visionaries is co-directed by Yoshi Mikamoto and Masakutsu Yojima. I don't know much about either of them other than that they worked on almost all the projects we've been talking about. These two guys are like part of the staff directors at TMS that are really doing all the direction. The bottom line is this was a show that was made specifically to cash in on the idea on this series of shows in the early and mid 80s that were made to sell toys. They're commercials with more commercials between the commercials. They're commercials for toys that have commercials for cereal and other toys within them. It's sort of insane.
Yeah, it is one of those things that makes it like He-Man. For people who are older than me, He-Man is like a name that like they had very intense feelings about when they were a kid, and there's still a lot of nostalgia, and there's a lot of like, you know, money, and like we could reboot that, we could make a comic series, we could sell these people's nostalgia back to them because this stuff was marketed to them so intensely when they were young. But like you just get a little bit removed from that. It's impossible for like me being born in 1987 to understand what the hell the appeal of He-Man was. Especially like the 90s, the toys were getting better too. Yeah. The action figures. Like when I was growing up, the hot action figure series was Alien.
Yeah.
Which were like these really detailed, really good looking, articulated figures that would have all these like little moving parts and like gimmicks, and they'd shoot little missiles and stuff. And you go back and you compare that to like a He-Man toy from the 80s. You're like, this is like a Happy Meal toy. This is a piece of crap.
They were kind of big. Well, some of the Transformers toys were actually, I wasn't allowed to have them, but my cousin had them. Some of those were kind of impressive, but they were also expensive. Yeah. I think as someone who was growing up around that time, I think that Ninja Turtles was kind of the turning point where you would have a cheap toy that at least had some production quality to it.
That's true. Those Ninja Turtle toys also very big in the early 90s. And I remember them. And they were looking pretty good.
They were detailed.
But for a toy commercial, it is still a show that is animated by TMS and had no overseers paying too close attention to what they do. So Visionaries is like kind of a weird example of these. Yeah. I went back and I tried to watch an episode of He-Man as for context. I've never seen any of these shows. Like I've never seen G.I. Joe. Transformers was still a little bit on when I was young, and I just knew I liked explosions. I don't think I ever was able to follow a plot of one. I was that young. But like, so I'm totally unfamiliar with this era of animation, and I tried to go back, and it was just like He-Man's unwatchable. Yeah. Any of those like Filmation or Hanna-Barbera kind of shows are just like so ugly and boring that it's just kind of impossible to watch.
Yeah, when I was trying to rewatch the original Ninja Turtles, I suddenly had a realization that I don't think I even really liked this show that much as a kid. I was really enjoying them introducing new toys. I think that I just never noticed that. But I'm watching, I'm like, this is dumb. This is the same story as last week. Was I really this stupid? And then a new monster or mutant will come in and I go, oh, now I'm feeling nostalgia because a new mutant walked in the room. I think that was the only reason I was watching this.
Yeah. I believe if you go back to that original Ninja Turtles TV show, it's like the first 6 episodes were done by TMS, and the animation was way better than the rest of the series. And like by the end, that series got really cheap, is my understanding. I'm not an expert on these things.
It was maddening as a kid because they would animate the wrong turtle talking, so suddenly Leonardo would be talking in Raphael's voice. And like the one thing that show did right is hire 3 guys with very different voices and acting styles. So as long as you had the color correct, you knew which character was which just by their voices.
It's like you can remember the color, you can remember 4 personalities. Yeah. The fact that they are basically the identical character palette swapped is like acceptable because the voice actors were all very good and the personalities were strong. And again, there was 4 of them. So you weren't going to get them confused. Now, Visionaries.
This is a good segue.
So this is a cartoon designed to sell action figures. We're not going to go into detail about the toys, but basically these are knights. There's a very loose Arthurian kind of vibe to Visionaries. The Visionaries, the Knights of the Magical Light are sort of resembling the Knights of the Round Table. Not so much that they're one-to-one characters or anything like that, but there's just like little bits here and there. That's like part of the the DNA or
they
whatever. So
they literally meet around a round table is one of the few things I noticed.
Yeah. So the all of the knights, and there's the good guy side and the bad guy side. The same way G.I. Joe had the G.I. Joe and Cobra. There are the Darkling Lords, who are the bad guys on this show, and there are the Knights of the Magical Light, who are the good guys in this show. They all are wearing identical looking, bulky kind of armor that looks somewhere in between a knight in shining armor, a football player, and now this is, and we will get into the comics on the last episode of this podcast. I'm not necessarily going to keep popping in details about that show, about the comics until then. But like one of the things that is specified in the first issue of that comic that is not spelled out, I don't think, on this show, is that everyone's armor is made out of discarded technology. So the idea is like they're picking up a computer monitor and putting it on their head, and that's a helmet, or like. So it has like a boxy, weird shape. It doesn't seem like it was, molded by a blacksmith or anything. It's this sort of like retrofitted, like chunky technology that is really convenient if you're making plastic figures, because you don't have to do any of the hard sculpting of like what the human form looks like. You're just making these like boxy people who more or less all look the same, except they're different colors. There's 4 Ninja Turtles. There are, I think, 12 of these characters that all look identical, and they do not have as distinct voice actors as the Ninja Turtles had, nor personalities, really. So, like, the very first thing you run into when you start watching this show is the realization that you don't know who the hell anyone is half the time.
Yeah.
I had to take a lot of detailed notes, and I still, if you were to stop me and say, okay, name the characters of Visionaries, I wouldn't be able to do it.
Yeah.
I would be able to name maybe 4.
Yeah.
But the gimmick of the toys was that they had these little hologram stickers. Tell me about these stickers, because I've not seen one of these toys in person.
They're actually pretty high quality things. They really work. They have a 3D quality to them. There was a short-lived hologram thing. I was really into hologram things and glow-in-the-dark things. And so, like, I remember there being holographic pogs. There was these weird little battle beasts, I think they were called, that had like a heat sensitive little hologram on their chests. It was basically rock, paper, scissors, and you had to press on the chest to see if you had fire, water, or wood. I guess wood stops water.
It's a dam.
It's a dam.
Let's say.
Anyway, so then there was Visionaries, and they had these things, and they're really great. And then some of them had a staff that had an additional one, which we'll explain eventually. And the vehicles had them. The ones on the vehicles were really good, and it actually led to an attempted knockoff that I think the idea was a different studio realized that Sunbow and Hasbro was doing a show, and I'm like, oh, what's the gimmick? The gimmick is holograms. We'll do our own, and we'll take advantage of their thing, not knowing that Visionaries was basically going to flop, called Supernaturals. And Supernaturals are maybe even better as far as the holograms don't work quite as well, but they're like full body ones where like you take off the guy's shirt and his whole body is like a skeleton hologram underneath. They're really, really fucking cool, even as an adult. I would love to just have big holograms all over my house just to look at.
Or all over your body.
Yeah. Like, tattoos that are holograms? Awesome. I mean, that sounds painful because it would need to have different... and I don't really honestly know how they work, to tell you the truth. They're not the same as... there's that other technology that...
There's lenticular.
Lenticular, thank you. They're not lenticular. Lenticular being that you could see different things depending on which...
Congratulations, noble knights.
So
you have survived the final test.
These had the illusion of death.
And you alone had the vision to reach the shrine.
It was...
You
I don't know how it worked. I guess maybe I should have
Visionaries.
researched the science behind it. But it was pretty cool. And from what I understand, it was pretty expensive. And that was part of why the toys failed. Because they were too expensive to make.
So this this was a toy commercial thing. They're trying to build a property wholesale. They're trying to get kids excited to buy into this world and these characters. So it's all designed hand in hand. We have a comic book series, we have a cartoon, we have an action figure, and it is the idea that it's like they're all feeding the little consumers into each other. So the comic was bi-monthly. I think the first issue came out before the show started, and I think the last issue came out after the show had already stopped airing. because there were 6 issues, so it was bi-monthly over the course of a year.
Yeah, so it runs pretty close.
Did you have anything else you wanted to say about like the history, the context?
Not
of
really.
Visionaries?
No.
So we will get into like what those holograms on the knights are and what they do and what they're supposed to represent in the world of the fiction as we get into this very first episode. Episode 1 is entitled "The Age of Magic Begins." So before we can talk about the first episode, we got to talk about this intro. We have a very simple bit of narration explaining the world for the first-time viewer in the intro that accompanies every episode. It is a time when magic is more powerful than science, and only those who control the magic control destiny. They are the Visionaries. It's about as vague and generic as you could possibly get.
Yeah, but the animation's fucking rad because that was the thing in the 80s and 90s is that the title animation was always the top of the line shit that the rest of this show could not live up to.
Yes. Now we talked about TMS, Japanese company. Like, make no mistake, Visionaries is anime as hell.
Yes.
It is it's straddling the world. If you watch this and Bubblegum Crisis back to back, you will be able to see like, okay, yes, Visionaries is a Western show. I just pulled another, like that was another anime that came out around the same time. It's not fully an anime-ass anime, but like so much of the world design and the animation style, and especially this opening, just absolutely batshit, just anime show up, cameras whipping around, doing, very hard for cameras to pan around characters as if they're 3-dimensional in a 2-dimensional animation. There's just like so much of that. It is incoherent. It's honestly what
it's
I would
flash.
say.
It's a 70s stoner van come to life, like a mural on the side of a van just come to life.
That's right, because we have the knights. We did not mention Visionary, and we're about to because this is the setup for the first episode, but it's a post-apocalyptic fantasy. I'm sure at some point during the initial meetings, the name Thundar the Barbarian came up. It is that sort of thing. So it's a bit of sci-fi, a bit of fantasy, which is a thing I enjoy. I like a Krull where it's kind of half Star Wars and half Beastmaster.
And that's sort of what He-Man was. He-Man wasn't well done, but it had that basis. The later reboots of He-Man went a little more into the idea of fantasy sci-fi matching up.
This opening, because it is edited, and I realize I'm saying this as someone who grew up watching the Botsmaster opening, which Jesus Christ, but this opening is so hyperactive and so hectic. And the theme song, which you heard Gabe's incredible metalcore like version of it, but Disembodied was not yet a band in 1987, so they didn't think, oh, what we should do is just like really heavy drop D riffs, and instead it is this like the theme song's very stop start. It's like don da don da don ba da da da. And it's just voices coming in every so often, like this like chanting monk chorus saying Visionaries, Knights of the Magical Light over and over again.
Visionaries, Knights of the Magical Light, Visionaries with magical powers they fight. Shit. What are the other lyrics?
It does not introduce you to the world of the show because you can't really even comprehend what you're seeing. It is all happening so fast. But it is impressive. It looks really cool, especially at the very end. They like zoom into this skeleton and it looks like an early, maybe like computer touched thing. I don't exactly know how they did that. It might not have anything to do with a digital production, but it felt like a little bit of digital post-production, which would be rare in 1987. What are the lyrics?
Okay, the lyrics are Visionaries, Knights of the Magical Light, Visionaries with magical powers they fight, powers of mind, strength, skill, and speed, powers to accomplish the greatest of deeds. Visionaries, Knights of the Magical Light. When I was a kid, I thought it was powers of blinding tranquility, which I don't know what that...
You're going to get so fucking chill, bro.
You're just going to go... You're not going to be able to see anything anymore. No, powers...
Mind-blowing serenity.
Mind, strength, skill, and speed, not...
There's even a shot in this opening where it does the, like, anime cliche of someone, like, diving into action, and then the background behind them is this, like, abstract colors and shapes, like, flying in a direction. It's very anime, this opening. But after the opening, we get to the episode proper. The first episode, The Age of Magic begins, and we hear the following narration... Far away in a distant galaxy, the people of the planet Prismos, not Earth. This is not future Earth.
Yeah.
This is a totally separate thing. So when you say, hey, why are there no people of color in this whole fucking show?
They didn't evolve.
Prismos doesn't have those.
They didn't evolve on Prismos, apparently.
This is a different world, okay? I'm sure there would have been plenty of Black Knights if this was Earth, but
I have to interrupt
Prismos.
for just a second, and that we're not going to go into it this episode, but there are some Asian-coded villains in a future episode.
Okay.
But they're definitely.
I'm excited to be corrected.
I didn't see any black people, or particularly or brown people, at all.
Because I will say, like, one of my problems with this show is I can't tell who is who because they all look alike and they all have kind of the same way of delivering their dialogue, and they are all white.
Yeah, I think one token black guy really would have at least even.
Like I was born in 1987. I grew up in the Rainbow Coalition, Burger King Kids Club.
Winston
like,
the Ghostbuster,
one of every race and one in a wheelchair, sort of a casting.
Winston the Ghostbuster,
era,
man.
Ghost Rider was a show I grew up watching. Very diverse cast on Ghost Rider. This is all to say, going back to this era of children's television where it's just like white. It is just a Jason Aldean concert up in this piece.
You know what I'll say in their defense is only having to mix one color of paint probably did save some money.
I think there was a video game company that was like, they didn't come up with new animations for women because they were just like, it's too expensive.
Yeah.
So they were just like justifying their sexism by just being like, well, cost, we couldn't possibly.
Boobs are hard.
We couldn't possibly add an extra burnt umber into that pigment there. Anyway, Prismos, not Earth. This is Prismos. Far away in a distant galaxy, the people of the planet Prismos lived in an age of great technology. They had taken control of all their sources of energy and enjoyed a life of comfort and ease for 7,000 years. And during this narration, we see a shot from outer space, and we see that Prismos has 3 suns. It has a green, a blue, and an orange sun. Now, I understand why you don't try to actually do these 3 suns justice in the art, because this would be one of the most insane looking shows ever if you tried to like actually depict what a planet with 3 light sources that are all different colors. Like it would just feel like a permanent rave, I think, on Prismos.
Yeah, and then like the in-between parts would be just brown.
Like, have you ever seen like stage lights where it's like all the colored lights come together to make a white light, but when you see the light reflecting off like a saxophone or whatever, it's this crazy rainbow glint? Like, that's what the entirety of Visionaries would look
cover
like.
of Dark Side of the Moon.
It would look like Dark Side of the Moon. It would be wild. They can't do it. Maybe now in 2025, in an era of computer-generated technology, we can finally do Prismos justice. And then it would be too dark because it's a streaming show, and people would be like, "Oh, well, it's important, so you have to make sure no one can see what's happening." Anyway, they take control of all their sources of energy, enjoyed a life of comfort and ease for 7,000 years. This is a tale of like the complacent laziness of mankind being punished. The realignment of the 3 blazing suns of Prismos spells the end of the age of technology. So you get these idea that it's like this solar flare basically that happened. These 3 suns, I guess, are rotating around the planet rather than the planet rotating around them. It would be a very complicated orbit, but at some point they line up and suddenly no electricity works, and the entire it's basically it's like the end of WALL-E.
Yeah,
is what happens is we have these lazy ass people of Prismos, and they have to be taken down a peg by fate and be sort of reverted back to their barbarian form through these solar flares or whatever. And you see Prismos, it is like super, this is the most anime the show gets. It is absolutely just a Gundam. It is these like really, really beautiful drafted like images of these, high-tech future buildings. But then like you get these automated cars that stop moving and like a flying vehicle crashing into a building. The skies all grow dark and red, and the entire rest of the series, like one of the coolest things about Visionaries is it has this really gloomy look because the skies are always like red and black. This is, like I think even the cartoons that took themselves seriously, like a G.I. Joe or whatever, they have blue skies, but this is a sort of a dark and dreary and desperate world as represented by these like dark red skies. You're seeing cars crash. You're seeing like a news broadcast that then fades out. We get more narration. when all the electrical energy had been depleted from the world, an age of magic began. But it would take some time before men would believe this. Years passed, and as the old order collapsed, a new, more primitive order rose from the rubble. And you get our first battle sequence, and again, I think the idea is like post-apocalyptic medieval. It's people storming a castle. They're wearing big, chunky metal armor. We're not told the origin of that armor in this, but again, I said in the comics it's supposed to be this like repurposed technology. And there's like a moat. They're using ladders to climb these castle walls. And defending the castle are 3 of the knights that we're going to follow for the rest of the series: Leoric, Ektar, and Farrell. We will get into the individual characters' personalities a little later. Right now, they're just sort of 3 anonymous knights. How do you feel about the way this like show opens?
Well, so to me, the idea is the best thing about the whole show is that there is this world where they had technology and it broke and they have to figure out what to do. So it has a kind of Mad Max vibe. It has a kind of Conan the Barbarian thing, but it also really reminds me of the Second Renaissance from the Animatrix. Like, that's my favorite Matrix thing, is the sort of apocalypse that killed off humanity, more or less. If we see humanity's dependence on these robots and refusal to take them seriously come back to bite them in the ass and destroy everything. So this is kind of like the G-rated version of that. To me, it's just a really interesting concept. It makes me wish that the whole episode was just this setup. Like we would get to see more of, I don't know, I like apocalyptic fiction. I like disaster movies and stuff. I really like that sort of like the world falls. I like that you have the first half of a disaster movie is everything falling apart, and the second half is then how do you come out of it. So when I watch this, it's really just a montage. It maybe 2 minutes total that really has all this stuff, and it does make me a little sad that we didn't. If they ever rebooted this, that would be something they would do, is that they would have like the first like 3 episodes would be a 3-parter, and the first part would be all about how everything went wrong.
I do think one of the good things about this show is, in its own children's show kind of way, it is about these characters trying to figure out, like, what does a functioning society look like in a world of magic where it's sort of feudal rulers and we have these powers, but we have the Superman problem of we have ultimate power, but there are too many problems to deal with at once, and how do we figure out to dedicate our time and that sort of thing. Like, it is there. It's just like, I do think, a reboot that is aimed more at a teenage audience, you would have a Visionaries that is a lot closer to, I don't know, it would be something like Thundar the Barbarian meets Deadwood.
Yeah. And later in the show, there are some Western episodes, actually. It's kind of funny. We'll talk about that later, but there is like, we do learn eventually something that they never get to open up, is that there is a bigger world with, like, it's almost a sort of Westworld idea where there are, I mean, for most of what we see is very medieval, like, not medieval, but like Renaissance era shit. But there are other worlds, which I think, could have been interesting if the show kept on going. I don't know if it would have been interesting because it was still a show written in 1987 to sell toys, but there's a possibility there.
Yeah, this show kind of exists in this weird space where if this show was successful, then people would be paying attention to it, and then it might not be good anymore. Because you kind of feel like it's when no one's paying attention and they take bigger risks with tone and with like content that would get vetoed by a nervous executive. That like this is where the show actually gets interesting and worth talking about. So, like, if this whole show was successful right from the jump and it just followed the tone of the first 4 or 5 episodes, you would kind of not think of it as a very good show.
Well, and then I think that's the reason why it's okay that you and I are covering this, because I think that the episodes of Genre Grinder we do are often about things that are independently made and they're weird. And they might not be good as far as, like society at large would consider them good, but because they didn't have the oversight of corporations, they're interesting in what choices they make.
And you mentioned that, like, in a hypothetical version of this, we would have a 3-parter opening that would go into more the fall of society and those early days before the re-emergence of magic. I will say this is something that was done a lot in the 80s. These children's cartoons would have these 3-4 part episodes. Transformers did it. G.I. Joe did it all the time. And this show, the first 3 episodes are one continuing story, to the point where I thought, when we first started doing research, I was like, oh shit, this is serialized. This is like an actual anime. And then after the first 3 episodes, it is episodic.
Yeah.
But so what we're only covering episode 1, but this story will be continued and concluded somewhat in by the time we finish episode 3 next episode.
Yeah.
Now,
the one
sorry,
thing
ahead.
that comes up while watching this is I'm trying too hard to make the universe make sense. And so I was, in my mind, I was like, did a copy of the Once and Future King somehow survive the apocalypse? But then it's not Earth, so they wouldn't have had the Once and Future King.
That's right.
And then I started overthinking which technologies are broken and which aren't, because throughout the show, every once in a while, we get some really silly version of technology that I will try to describe when I see them, but like pulley systems and stuff like that.
We're about to see one in a second. I do want to mention, I did mention Leoric, Ektar, and Farrell, 3 of the heroes of the show, are defending the castle. Darkstorm and some of his cronies are the main villains of the show. Though one of the interesting things about this show, and it ultimately these 2 sides, I feel like G.I. Joe is sort of like terrorists versus U.S. Army, but this show is sort of like Cold War, where it's sort of like Soviets versus America, where it's a lot of the war that is going on is, I mean, it's not cold because they are having battles every episode, but like they're sort of pitched as different ideologies rather than just like one of them is pure evil.
Yeah.
They have different ideas of like what is the way to rule the society. And so Darkstorm and the Darkling Lords, they are the ones attacking Leoric, and ultimately down the line, they will be the people who are like, oh, everything's going to descend into chaos unless you have a strong fascist hand. So it's that classic, like, I'm the villain who, but my villain origin story is that I'm the only one who understands that the natural state of man is anarchy, and like you need strong power to like suppress the anarchy. This is, again, part of the thing that is only a little bit explored in the show, but makes it interesting to think about. I also want to mention Leoric has a whip. It is the 80s, and the masculinity of this tenor of entertainment is like super macho. It is the era of, Rambo. It is the era of WWF. It is the era of G.I. Joe
He-Man.
and He-Man,
He-Man.
and all of that. So when I say that, like, I get a lot of gay vibes from this show, I'm really just saying, like, this is of a culture that I get a lot of gay vibe from in general. There's just, like, a lot of daddies in the show, and Leoric has, like, this hot little handlebar mustache and a whip, and I'm just sort of like...
There's a lot of gay facial hair on this show. In an era
again, because they're all men, and they're all white, and they all have facial hair. It's just, like, and they're all macho. You just kind of get to a point where you're like, okay, these are all different people you would see at the what's the parade, the Castro in San Francisco, in Fulton Street Festival. I forget the name of it.
I'm not allowed
gay
to know.
Pride Parade.
They don't.
The Kink Festival that happens in San Francisco every year. This is the type of people who we are.
I mean,
watching.
we're gonna really, the kink shit gets that. There were. I'll go back. They'll say there wasn't a lot of facial hair on characters in these days. You would sometimes have like a Mr. T type. So the fact that they almost all have facial hair, I think it's supposed to make them look more like knights. The fact that some of them are gray haired is kind of interesting. That's definitely something you wouldn't do, is have your action heroes have gray hair back in those days.
I feel like in my era, the character, you would have to have like a kid character, because the executives were like, oh no, kids aren't going to be able to watch Batman and emphasize with Batman. They want to pretend they're a kid hanging out with Batman. And the answer is always like, no, we just like Batman. But I don't think that was as common in the 80s. So the fact that all of the characters in this show are really old is not necessarily different than a G.I. Joe or a He-Man. Though I guess Transformers had like teenage kid characters,
Yeah,
right?
the movie at least has the kid.
Yeah.
I think that they kind of messed up with Visionaries, and I think that Farrell is supposed to be the kid character, but...
Yeah, but like as the kid character, he's like 25.
Yeah.
He's not 17.
Yeah, the median age for a Visionary is 47.
Exactly. They are all divorced and they all have opinions about cigars.
Yeah.
So After this little battle scene that is not really about the plot, it's just sort of setting up that there are these warring kingdoms within Prismos. We see the evil kingdom that Darkstorm leads, and scientists trying to pitch him post-electricity tech, such as a catapult powered by guinea pigs. If you can use friction of something running to create electricity, then this to me says that electricity can still work. If basic scientific principles that generate,
yes.
like if you can do a coal power plant now, you can still burn coal in their time. Then I don't think actually they need to live in a. This is a children's show. We don't need to
but
be
I mean, there's certain things. So
like
what is tech? Like sometimes they're saying it's electricity doesn't exist, but sometimes they're saying technology. So it's like there's an unseen godly hand that like doesn't let them do certain things.
It's a little bit of just like comic relief. It's very broad. They drop a trap door and the scientist falls through and splashes in the water. This is a show that like all the baseline level of how characters talk is just kind of bellowing exactly what they're thinking.
Yeah.
There's not that like sarcasm or nuance or like pop culture references that you get in a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Yeah. So when you get comic relief like this, it is almost always this like bespoke little thing. It's like, and now here's a wacky thing that's here to make you laugh. So this is like just an example of the way comic relief is utilized, at least early on. Again, later on, the show gets weirder in a way that they loosen up. But right now, things are very stiff. And that is the comic relief, is like a wacky guinea pig scientist getting dropped through a trapdoor. Next person who shows up is Merklin, one of the main characters of the show. A wizard, and you said it's a 70s van come to life. Merklin is the most 70s van wizard you've ever seen. He is pondering an orb.
Yep.
He has an orb. This is a wizard. This is when we are in wizard jail. This is the wizard that put us there.
He's got a long beard and mustache and no hair on top of his head, and he wears a cloak or a dress, basically. It's a cloak, but
now we've established that several years have passed since the fall of technology. So Merklin has kind of just been biding his time. We got a shot of him in the opening when you see the fall of society. You get a shot of him sort of observing everything. So he's just kind of biding his time. He's waiting for conditions to get bad enough, I guess, that he can sort of step in and assert his influence. And he tells Darkstorm that there's a lot of magic in his hideout on Iron Mountain. And that the Age of Magic has begun, mirroring what the narrator said earlier. Darkstorm doesn't believe it. There's no such thing as magic. He drops Merklin down a trapdoor too, but there's like a little bit of a thing there where they're about to take his orb, and then the orb has a mind of its own and goes down. So you're like, oh, Merklin, he didn't fall down that trapdoor by accident. He knows what he's doing. We then cut to Leoric and Ektar in the Good People Kingdom, and they are also getting the pitch from Merklin. He shows them an illusion of fish swimming through the air, and that little display of magic proves to them, like, oh, you know what? There might be something to this. They're more trusting, believing. They're the good guys, so they're going to know intrinsically, like, that is correct. Also, you get the feeling later on that this is a pitch that he is not just giving to these two sides that we are going to spend the rest of the series watching fight. He's literally going to, like, every civilization on the planet and just being like, by the way, you guys should show up too. It's sort of like an open tournament.
Yeah. And it makes it more, the fact that he's, for the most part, at least in the beginning, a neutral player, I think is another really interesting touch, because he's sort of like a mythological god, like not like a god as modern Christians believe in God, but like a character you'd read of in Greek mythology or something. That's like,
yes, there is an ambiguity to Merklin that you just like. The first thing that you do when you're making a kid show generally is like, all right, well, first let's make sure there's no ambiguity. Bad guys, super bad. Good guys, super good. Anyone who is in between, by the end of the episode, they will state whether or not they landed on bad or good side. So we have that conclusion. And then Merklin, the idea that, like, he is manipulative, clearly. He is sort of malevolent. And they don't trust him, but they still go along with him. It's like a very uneasy alliance that even the good guys have with Merklin. Yeah. They will often do his bidding, but reluctantly. It's really cool. It's that sort of thing where you're getting little implications here and there of the more interesting, complicated show and world that this could be. So when Leoric and Ektar get pitched Merklin's pitch, Mordred is spying on them, and he flies away from them on a hang glider. crashes through a window. So I guess these two castles are like right next to each other. And he crashes through a window into another castle back to Darkstorm's lair. So again, they are a hang glide right away. He tells Darkstorm that Leoric and Ektar are taking it seriously, and he starts laughing at them. But as soon as Darkstorm hears about them taking it seriously, he goes, well, actually, maybe we should take this magic thing seriously too. And that's sort of the first thing you get of like, this is a Cold War parable. Mm-hmm. This is an arms race. Like, we don't necessarily want magic, but if they have magic, we better make sure our magic is better than their magic.
It's very 80s because it's both a Cold War arms race and it's also sort of a drug dealing metaphor where Merklin is supplying people with these powers, but he needs favors in return. It's like, to me, I don't know if that was
Merklin's the CIA feeding crack into the Bloods and the Crips.
Exactly. I don't.
This is like the monkey paw curse that gets the Visionaries reboot. Is like, well, it's for Tubi and it's an urban audience and it's like it's now actually early 90s LA is when it takes place.
I don't know. There's something about like there's too many. The metaphor is there, man. The metaphor is
there. And then this scene where Mortrid crashes through the window and whines to Darkstorm, he's being very silly and high-pitched and undignified. We learn that, Mortrid is the comic relief character on the bad people's side. The good people have no comic relief character, and that's part of what makes them so boring. Yeah. But Mortrid is sort of just like the low-status character that everyone can kick. He gets dropped down a trap door after he tells them all that.
Just for fun. Just because.
Now we jump ahead to a stormy night on Iron Mountain, and we see a lot of knights, all white, have shown up at this mountain.
All white, mostly men.
This is the like open tryout. This is like the first scene before we get to like, okay, here are the core 12 people we're going to follow. We now see like 40, 50, 60 potential knights. There's one scene after this where they sort of all drop away, but I do wonder, like, would these characters have come back? Is there some resentment? Are some of these knights who don't have magical powers, they showed up. They weren't 100% convinced there's magic to begin with, and then once they saw the trials that they had to endure, they're like, you know what, I'm bouncing. Is there regret?
Yeah.
I think you could, if this was a long-running comic series, you would have a one-shot that was about one of these knights who turned away.
I mean, that's a constant in the X-Men comics, is about like, why were these people given powers? And then maybe that they're actually evil because they have powers, and we should put them in concentration camps. Like there's a lot of established drama there, and that kind of jealousy.
Leoric again kind of asserts himself as a leader for all of these people by cracking his whip and sort of saying something encouraging. He goes, onward to the shrine. We get some really cool multi-plane animation as the knights sort of climb and traverse this mountain. It's this thing where it's like there's a lot of entrances, there's a lot of ways you can get to the shrine, a lot of different paths.
I'm pretty sure it would have been a play set if the toys had been more popular. It would have been like the Castle Grayskull size.
All of these locations feel like they're designed for that kind of like oversized Ghostbusters firehouse playset sort of a thing, because there's so many trap doors and like hidden compartments and stuff throughout the series. Yeah. Again, this is a show. They know what they're doing. Yeah. And this is a show that this is an episode specifically that is like, let us install some desire in these children watching this show. They're going to want all the toys. So we get these like little scenes of them climbing and getting the mountain. And we get to the very first obstacle, which is a hallway of smashing blocks that are kind of synchronized. It's very Double Dragon. It's very like 1987. So this is just what games on the NES were in 1987. Yeah. This is just like a section of a Mega Man level is just like blocks coming down from the ceiling and smashing. But one of the knights, Witterquick, is very quick, as you might guess from his name, and he is able to run past all the smashing rocks. The rest of the knights who are there look at what he just pulled off, and say, well, I'm not doing that. I'm leaving. But Merklin sort of teleports in and goes, oh, yes, okay, this Witterquick, there's some potential. That is the last time we see any knights who are not going to be the core cast of the series. Presumably, there's similar trials all over this mountain that people are failing, but this is the one that we see.
I have to say there is a rumor on the now defunct fan web pages for this series that one of the knights says, "Oh shit," when he runs through the thing, and that it made it past the censors. I didn't hear it, but
good teenagers take off your clothes.
Yeah.
The line is from Aladdin.
But that's like the only like. You know how, there's all these like conspiracy theories about cartoons from the 80s and 90s. That's the only one I could find here, is that people swear that one of the knights says, "Oh shit," when Witterquick makes it through.
Now, we are going to be introducing all of these characters and their voice actors later, but right now in the series, these knights, again, because they all look identical, they all have the same clunky-looking armor, and they're all white men with facial hair who all talk kind of like this.
Well, actually, Witterquick's one of the few without facial hair.
No, that's true. He is sort of one of the younger ones.
Yeah.
But we're going to introduce them later, because right now they're kind of anonymous. This is sort of how we are, as an audience, are growing to know who they are. So that's Witterquick's thing. He's a fast runner. We see later on that the Darkling Lords pass a rope bridge, and they cut it behind them, and a bunch of knights fall to their deaths in a ravine. But Arzon, one of the Knights of the Magical Light, clings onto it. And even when the ladder turns into snakes, which I don't know if that's specifically something Merklin is actively doing, or if that's just like the natural state of that ladder is of
snakes.
That rope bridge, is it turns into snakes. Even then, he sort of keeps his wits about him. He falls, but he lands on an outcropping with some ferns, and he gets taunted by the Darkling Lords, but he goes, he improvises his way out of it. He MacGyvers it. He pulls some branches off of this fern, and he builds himself some wings. There's some really nice animation of him like snapping branches off of the bush. Again, it's just like the sort of thing you would never see in a He-Man. Yeah. And he flies across the chasm. And again, Merklin is sort of keeping watch on everything. We cut now into the mountain. We have Farrell and Leoric are sort of traveling through this labyrinth, and they're talking about what are they going to do when they're rebuilding New Valeric, this is the kingdom of Leoric. New Valeric is where a lot of the action takes place, and you will grow to love and hate the citizens of New Valeric as the Knights of the Magical Light love and hate the citizens of New Valeric. As emphasis by this exchange here, because Farrell says, "I think we should build a jousting arena." And Leoric grumbles and says, "The citizens are probably going to want a botanical garden instead." And then Farrell goes, "Botanical garden? You must be joking."
Yeah, he's so upset.
This is the 80s. This is Reagan. This is where the show is anything that has to do with like building up war or like being a masculine macho man and proving your masculinity on a jousting range. That is like good for society. But anything that has flowers in it is like some gay shit.
It's like the heroes are fascist and the villains are more fascist.
Yeah, it's gross. But it's funny because again, I don't know if this show is 100% on board with these hero characters.
No, I don't think. I mean, by the time we get in, I don't think it is. I think that's part of the goal is that to muddy those waters.
But these botanical gardens are coming back. If there's anything resembling a like subplot that goes over this entire first season, it's the citizens and their demand for botanical gardens.
It's very strange. It's like that's the real political subtext of the show.
Yeah,
is the writer's hatred of what are they called? Oh fuck! What do you call the things that tell you what you're allowed, how high your grass can be?
Oh, it's an HOA.
Yes. The writers had a fight with the HOA and wrote it into their kids' cartoon to sell toys.
This is again a world where everyone is relying on technology. People are starving, but like the number one issue for citizens in New Valeric is will there or will there not be a botanical garden? At any rate, there's this very weird scene where Mortrid, in an attempt to distract Leoric and the Knights, he tucks himself into a corner and calls for help. And then when they come, they're like, "Wait a second, you're a bad guy." He just runs away. And then Leoric's like, "Well, you have to admit, he did waste some of our time." Later, this will become important, kind of, I guess, because someone said, "Hey, you're a bad guy," and apparently that is a very like intuitive, foxy kind of a thing to observe. Yeah. Very weird sequence to happen here. The next one is a little bit more of like a classic magical trial thing because they come across this big chamber that has this giant stone statue. It's very Jason and the Argonauts. And they don't want to wake it, so they're trying to sneak very quietly. But one of the Darkling Lords, Recon, is spying on them, and he throws a rock at the sleeping statue to wake it up. So now they have to deal with this sort of kaiju thing inside of this cave. And what Leoric does is just sort of, he goes Leroy Jenkins on it. He just runs towards it. And then immediately the statue's like, oh shit, oh no, what do I do? And then just collapses and retreats. You get the feeling that it's like, this could have been a battle scene, but that seems really expensive to animate. So like the statue barely appears on screen. It is like it wakes up and then the issue is dealt with within 10 seconds.
But they make it seem like Leoric is he's a tactical genius by doing this. He's like, I decided that it must not have ever had any natural enemies, so if I ran at it, I would freak it out.
I'm pretty sure in nature, if something has no natural enemies, it doesn't know to be afraid of something. It's the opposite. It's the animals with all the natural enemies that have the most fears. But
you don't
whatever.
run at a bear. Actually, you do run at a bear, I guess. You don't run at a bear, but you make yourself look big.
I think it depends on the bear. I think some bears you play dead.
Yeah.
You got to know which is which. People, before you go camping, do your research. I don't want you to get hurt by bears.
Carry bear spray.
And the bears, they're interacting with humans more.
Yeah.
As climate change happens, they're gonna. We all need to learn bear safety. Is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Heart health and bear safety. That's the name of my new book about climate change and the future. Perhaps a solar flare will take out all of our technology before I have to worry about that. We'll see.
Is bear spray technology? It's like aerosol.
Yeah.
Aerosol wouldn't work.
Well, no, you have to have the old perfume thing. You can't have aerosol.
You just have to have a ball and throw pepper right at.
Or it's a smoke orb like they have in a Catholic mass.
Right. No, that makes
they're
that
burning
makes
the
the most
incense
sense.
down the aisle.
Yes.
That is how in the world of Visionaries you scare off bears. Okay. I don't know if there are bears on the. Well, there are bears on the show. We're going to find a bear.
Yeah,
soon.
there's at least one. There's at least enough to people know what the word bear means.
There's a lot of magical creatures on the show, so it's unclear exactly what their ecosystem is like. If they have all of, because like in the world of Pokemon, they say, oh, it's a dog type Pokemon, but you're like, I never see dogs, I just see Pokemon. What is that? Where'd you get the word dog from?
We killed them off.
Yeah,
the breeding Pokemon.
The Pokemon killed them off. The only animals in this world are Pokemon. This is sort of like, Prismos has some Earth animals, but it also has some of its own shit too. Anyway, we get another scene. It's Galadriel running into Virulina. They immediately start calling each other smelly and ugly. Now these are the two women.
Only two women. Well, no, there's there's two other female characters that are not leads. There are two other female characters.
One of the citizens who's complaining about a botanical garden later on in the series also is a woman.
There are two repeating characters that are women. I should say.
But as far as the action characters go, this is, the world of, He-Man and G.I. Joe had female action characters. So Visionaries does too. There's nothing there's nothing like groundbreaking about these two characters. In fact, they suck because it's the classic thing where female characters can only do violence on other female characters. Because we're very nervous about men fighting women.
Yeah, thank God Mortal Kombat changed that for everybody.
Well, yeah, the way I always think about it is in WWE now still they have rules about intergender wrestling that they kind of dip their toes in a little, where they have mixed gender matches, but whenever the man gets tagged in, the other man also has to jump in. You don't ever have the an intergender fight, but then there'll be little things where it's like, oh, the bad guy comes, he's about to attack the woman, but then the good guy comes and saves her, and so it's like they'll threaten it and they'll tease it and they'll have a little bit.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it's no, men fight men, women fight women. This is one of the things I like about the HBO Max show Harley Quinn. Is Harley Quinn will just get punched in the fucking face and get a bloody nose from a man. And it's good, because you're taking her seriously. If she's going to be in this violent world and be taken seriously and equally as a man, then she should be being punched in the face by men.
I have to say, one of my most, how you have these moments in your childhood that are really they form your moral center, and sometimes they're really weird. One of them was I was playing Mortal Kombat and my mom walked in and said, "Are you hitting a woman?" And I got scared. And then my friend looked and said, "Well, she's hitting him too." And my feminist mother had to go, "Yeah, I suppose that's true.
Mom, if I don't hit her, she's going to blow a kiss and incinerate me."
And it was just this moment where oh, mom is inadvertently teaching me something. Classic, the best one I have is that when I asked my mom as a stupid child, I said, "Mom, why is there black entertainment television so there isn't white entertainment television?" And she didn't even look at me, and she just said, "Because all TV is white entertainment television." And it was just such an eye-opening moment. But this was the opposite. It was the moment where oh, mom doesn't know everything, and feminism can mean hitting girls apparently.
Yeah, Mom, Mortal Kombat is woke. Get over it.
Exactly. She had to.
I do think if you like jump now to MCU movies in 2025 or whatever, you are getting like a male supervillain punching Black Widow, and it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Like, I do think we've sort of gotten over that in a context of like heightened crazy superpowers. It's like, it's fine. They're all over the top.
Hong Kong movies have been doing it for a long time, like martial arts.
But in American cartoons, we have to have one woman character, and if we have one woman character, we have to have another so that they have someone to fight. And of course, they hate each other because they're both women, and women hate each other. This is a classic trope. They call each other ugly and smelly. This is what I mean when I say like the humor is just kind of weak. Because you don't have characters who are like sly and sarcastic and have like a wit. It's either someone being like, I was only moving to get away from your foul odor. That's the sort of thing they do. They have a little sword fight. They fall into the water fighting. Virulina swims away. Galadriel gets grabbed by a giant octopus. As she's being pulled underwater, she grabs a plug and drains the water. Where does the octopus go? Off screen.
It dries up and dies. That's what I assume.
It's like TMS is. It's like, look, we can do really impressive giant monster kind of fights or whatever, but like you're not giving us a budget to actually do the fight part.
Yeah.
So we're going to imply like the incredible things that can happen in this world, the potential for excitement, but we're not actually gonna. We're not going to like fully animate. This thing has 8 legs. You want us to animate all 8 legs fighting this woman? No, it is going to just be pushed off screen. But just remember, Virulina and Galadriel fought underwater, so that's important.
Which is the only thing about them that Merklyn notices.
Now later, we got another little scene. This actually might be another group of knights who we don't see. So maybe there were more flunkies who are scattered throughout this episode. Because Kravex is hiding in the ceiling as a bunch of knights are walking by. He picks up a beehive and throws it at them. They all run away from the bees. And then he's like, oh man, I can sell these weapons later. So Kravex has played Elder Scrolls games. He understands.
Yeah.
You just keep picking up everything. Yeah. You fast travel, sell, and then you go back to the dungeon and you pick up their weapons again.
Yep.
So Kravex is a scavenger type. Remember that for later. Then we have another little scene where we have a Darkling Lord versus one of these knights. It is Sindar versus Cryotech. They're fighting. Sindar jumps up and starts climbing on the ceiling. It's this like frozen cave. So there are these like frozen stalactites from the ceiling that he climbs. He knocks them down, and it's a bunch of sharp ice that falls on top of Cryotech. Cryotech uses his brute strength to sort of burst free from these big heavy stalactites, but Sindar has already fled. That's their battle. So now those are the two things that define them. A lot of this show is sort of like you show up for your first day of freshman year of high school and you're eating yogurt.
And now you're yogurt
guy. And then some fucking jock goes, hey, yogurt, that's my seat. And then for the rest of your fucking high school life, everyone's calling you yogurt. That's kind of what happens in Visionaries. It's just sort of like, hey, you must be a dolphin. You love the water. It's like, I was knocked into water once. It's like, yeah, dolphin. So yeah, again, these are just like little vignettes to introduce us to this like crazy magical labyrinth that all the people have to get through to get the magic at the end. We get another little sequence where Darkstorm has stumbled upon all of the Darkling Lords, and they're tied up in snares hanging from the ceiling. We didn't see how this happened. It's just like all the bad guys we've seen up to this point are now captured and hanging from snares from the ceiling. Yeah. And they're all begging him to set them free, and he uses his position of power to basically force them all to swear allegiance to him. So this is like the dynamic. We have the Darkling Lords, who are only a group because of this one moment. Now, why do they have the integrity to hold on to this promise when they are just pure evil? I don't know.
They don't, though. That's one of the interesting things about the show is that they start to not. That's
true. They're always on the verge of leaving Darkstorm or like having no faith in Darkstorm's leadership. Yeah. You are correct. They don't think of him as a great leader. They're just sort of like, well, I guess this coalition makes sense, and it definitely makes sense in this moment as I'm trapped in this fucking cave for the rest of eternity unless he lets me down. So they swear allegiance to him, and that is how the Darkling Lords form. Though the name is only coined a little bit later. And now we see that Aloric and Farrell and I think maybe Witterquick at this point are like lost in this labyrinth. It's at this point that I realized that Iron Mountain is actually just Hellraiser 2, one of my favorite.
Yeah, I didn't think of that.
80s movies. Yeah. Hellraiser 2, really good sequel to the first Hellraiser in that it is like only incredible matte paintings of a vision of hell that just looks like power metal album covers. Yeah. It's like story-wise, it makes no sense because it's just characters wandering through this horrible place and shouting for each other. But it just has this awesome vibe to it. And this is kind of the vibe I get from Iron Mountain is this like, again, we got 70s Wizard Van energy. We have prog rock album cover energy. Mm-hmm. This is what this labyrinth feels to me. It is like the album cover for a Halloween album. Yeah. They think they might be lost in the labyrinth, but Farrell smells his way to the next room.
Yes.
Remember that. That's Farrell. He's good at smelling.
And his name is Farrell. That's his name. It's not his nickname.
That's right. F-E-R-Y-L, but still, it's Farrell. Yeah. It's referring to an animal. They continue their conversation. I've been thinking, what about a jousting arena and a botanical garden? I don't know. Do you think there will be room for both? This is what happens when you have a writer's room that just says good enough and moves on.
Well, and some, this is already getting longer than we intended the first episode to be, but do you think that these first 3 episodes were the only 3 that went through standards and practices and like Hasbro's people, and that's why they even compared to other episodes feel so like committed like this, like writers roomed?
Something along those lines.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's standards and practices or if it's just we're setting up the world and then we're going to let you writers do your thing for the rest of it, but like this is the part we're paying attention to. It also might be one of those things where beginning of pre-production they had certain ambitions, and by the time they got into production they already knew that this was not going to be the next G.I. Joe. But at any rate, this is the exact same story as the first issue of the comic, whereas later issues of the comics don't follow the plots of the episodes at all. So it makes me think this is like foundational. We have all decided as a committee this is how we are going to introduce this world, and then after that everyone's sort of left to their own devices as to what that
someone
means.
at Hasbro signed off on it and then totally lost interest.
But the idea of like, what if we did both? I don't know. Is there room? It's like, what are you talking about? It's a fucking wasteland. It's a post-apocalyptic wasteland. You have nothing but open space. Anyway, the Knights and the Darkling Lords all encounter each other. All the good guys that we've seen up to this point, all the bad guys we see up to this point, they encounter each other in this banquet hall. They all begin to fight. One of the Darkling Lords, I forget which, I forgot to write this down, hides under a table. That is what is going to get him his totem later on. We haven't talked about the totems. Oh, here we go. Lexor.
Yeah, Lexor.
Lexor hides under a table. It just sounds like a medication to me, but
it is. I'm pretty sure.
Lexor hides under a table to hide. So there we go. That we get his informing bit of character there. Lexor may be the least important character out of all the 12.
Yeah, and he looks a little too much like Crowd Tech without his helmet on.
Yeah. At any rate, there's a fight, but then Merklin shows up. He says, "Stop! There's enough magic for everyone. All you need to do is break down this wooden door." Why he makes them break? It's like a weird, arbitrary, like tiny obstacle after all the big obstacles that they went through. It's just sort of like we just want to have another thing. Cryotech knocks down the door. Magical light sort of bursts through, and there's this huge magical whirlpool that's flinging them around the room. And then it stops, and they walk through. It's very arbitrary, despite the fact that this is like clearly these are the episodes that everyone agreed on. This is how we're going to tell the story. They weren't particularly interested in like telling an elegant story
narrative.
Here. It's a lot more arbitrary than later episodes would be. I think they just sort of pitched a bunch of different little things that could happen and then strung them together, and that's this episode. They walk through, and Merklin says, "You and you alone had the vision to reach the shrine. You are the Visionaries." This is the title of the cartoon. I think this is also the last time anyone fucking says Visionaries on the show. And also, did they have vision to reach the shrine? Like some of them are just like, well, you had vision to get tied up from the ceiling, and then someone came by and let you free after you had to pledge your loyalty to them reluctantly. Is that vision? I don't know. I don't know if everyone necessarily proved themselves equally getting here, but they all got here. So Merklin says that he has this magic to give them. In return for this magic, he's going to grant these worthy knights. They will have to perform tasks for him that he'll get into later.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
The first one's free.
Tom Nook is going to give you your house, and you're just going to owe him later. Don't worry about it.
The first one's free. I'm telling you.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, here we go. Drug dealers. First one's free. Now, the magic that these people are all going to get, they basically take the form of totems, these holograms that appear in these very conspicuously empty spaces on the chest pieces of their armor.
Yeah, I guess they're supposed to be.
It's almost as if they knew.
You were saying that the armor was old technology. I guess they decided to just put computer screens on their chests. I never thought of that until right now, but that makes sense. That's what those are.
That's kind of, I think, what's going on is they have some Prismos flat screen technology on their tummies, and that is where these holographic totems show up. And of course, on the action figures, this is where that sticker goes.
You called it tummies, so now they're Teletubbies in my.
They are Teletubbies. Look, the Visionaries are just Teletubbies who punch.
They're Teletubbies for boys.
They're just Teletubbies for cool guys like us.
Okay, sorry. Ours.
So anyway, all of these totems take the forms of these holograms that appear on their chests or stomachs or whatever. Arzon gets the totem of the eagle for finding wings when necessary. Arzon's the one who built wings out of the fern. Sindar, he was climbing up the stalactites, so he gets the gorilla totem. Witterquick, he was the one who ran past all of those like crushing rocks that went down from the ceiling, so he gets the cheetah totem. Kravex gets the totem of, quote, the only airborne scavenger on Prismos, the Phylot. So this is the one, or are there a couple fake?
Two, yeah, I think two.
There are two fantasy animals who are totems, and the rest of them are totems that are animals that we would be familiar with here on Earth. But Kravex, because he was scavenging those weapons after throwing the beehive at that group, he gets the Phylot. Ektar gets the totem of the fox for sensing the ambush. Now, did Ektar sense an ambush, or did he walk into an ambush and go, hey, I think we've just been ambushed? Whatever. Ektar gets the fox. Mortred gets the scampering beetle for, and this is probably the quote of the episode for me, quote, for bootlicking above and beyond the call of duty. We haven't really gotten into it on this, but like the key thing about Mortred is that he is a sycophant. He is the Smithers to Darkstorm's Mr. Burns, and so he is constantly kissing the big bad guy's ass, and Darkstorm hates him. This is not he doesn't really get rewarded for this.
I remember the rewatch back in the early 2000s. I watched it with my friend Blake, who I think you met. Yeah, you went to a Goblin concert with us, and we just couldn't believe they were using the word sycophant on a 80s kids show. We're like that.
Yes.
And I'm like, wow, did they use like real like $4 word or whatever the term is? And I just thought it was cool. Anyway, go on. Sorry.
Well, there was actually, it was interesting. There was actually this post going around social media recently about this consulting firm that all of these production companies consulted with in the 80s for their cartoons. And the consulting firm basically just made 80s cartoons worse by like going through and taking out all jokes that were like they thought that kids wouldn't get, and like making all of the women be more conservative.
I saw
and just basically
the Janine from Ghost.
Yes.
And I remember when that happened. I remember when Janine went from one of my favorite characters to this weird mom.
Yeah, they remodeled Janine on the real Ghostbusters because they thought she was, quote, and this is like an actual scanned document from this consulting firm. They said she was, quote, too slutty.
Yeah, I remember that, and I remember it pissing me off because I liked that character a lot. Like I was definitely guilty of the icky girl thing when I was a kid. Like no, I don't want to own toys, but I wanted a Janine toy, and they didn't make one until I was almost too old to have toys. And I remember that, and that pissed me off because Janine was really funny. And also Annie Potts has got to be one of my first ever crushes. Like noticing women level crushes.
I think the way I think about Annie Potts is her character in Pretty in Pink, where she's just like the cool, like 30-something record store owner who's like trying to straddle this like the hip days of her youth with like being a business owner, and she is like a little more mature than all these teenage kids, but she kind of relates to them in a way the other adults don't.
Yeah.
And like, in that first Ghostbusters movie, she is sort of set up as this like potential romantic interest for Egon. Because they're both intellectuals. Yeah. But then in that second movie where she's more the love interest of Rick Moranis, she is more of like a hipster type. she does feel like more of a quirky Cyndi Lauper kind of energy to her.
She's very Cyndi Lauper, definitely. Well, and I think that we're going way off topic here, but I think that Janine on the cartoon was supposed to be Cyndi Lauper-esque. I think that she was kind of her fashion was based on that. And I of all the things I call Cyndi Lauper slutty, is it not one of them?
No, it's very odd. But I think that this is like, it's the kind of thing that the children's entertainment industry was actively trying to stomp out, is references to like being a sycophant or bootlicking or whatever.
The bootlicking gets pretty fucking pervy on this show. In there,
yes, in the context of all these macho men, when they're really talking about bootlicking constantly, they say the word bootlicking like 5 times in this episode.
My friends, I think we've been deceived.
Mordred? Why don't you speak? Is your tongue sore today from licking your master's boots? Stick it out. Let me see.
Savor my sigh, Victor! Mordred, you've done your job. Get over here!
Immediately, master. How can that sycophant call himself a knight?
And throughout the series, they keep returning to this theme that Mordred is this like little groveling beetle. And in fact, he says when he complains to Merklin that he's a beetle, Darkstorm tells him to shut up. And he turns into a beetle to grovel to Darkstorm to apologize. So it's like, all right, Merklin called this one. I don't know if the women necessarily have to be Aqua characters, but like he definitely he got Mordred's number. So we move on to Feral, who gets the Totem of the Wolf because of his tracking skills through the labyrinth. We have Virulina, who is the bad woman. She showed killing instinct underwater, so she becomes the shark. Meanwhile, Galadria gets the dolphin because dolphins are sharks that are nice. In the world of popular culture.
Dolphins are girl sharks.
Dolphins are girl sharks, exactly. Now, in modern times, we know that dolphins are evil. Yeah. That it's like just because they're smart doesn't mean they're not evil. They're not all flipper. In fact, a lot of them kill for fun. Whereas you might say a shark is not evil because it is only doing the thing that it needs to do to survive, which is eat a lot of calories. Anyway, Galadriel is a dolphin because the two girls have to have totems that are related to each other because they're always going to fight. Also, Galadriel's reasoning that she gets is Merklin says no animal evinces greater intelligence. Again, evince is probably a word that you would not put in a children's show if you were super concerned with them not getting things. No animal evinces greater intelligence, and then in parentheses, under the ocean, which is like a very qualified way of like talking about how smart she is.
Backhanded compliment.
It's like Merklin has to fucking neg her and be like, yeah, for a woman, you are very smart. Lexor gets the armadillo because he crawled to retreat the battle when they were having that fight in the banquet hall. He's the one who crawled under the table, so he gets the armadillo. Cryotech gets the totem of the bear because he's very strong and has great endurance. He threw off all those ice stalactites that fell on him, and then he broke down that wooden door. Recon gets the totem of the lizard for his, quote, stealth and treachery. Don't know if lizards are treacherous, but he is the one... He is the one who woke up that giant statue by throwing a rock at it. So he was hiding and was trying to actively fuck over other people. So he gets the lizard. Leoric gets the totem of the lion for courage and leadership. He has shown a lot of courage and leadership throughout the entire episode. And it is worth noting, as we're doing our little Knights of the Round Table references, the lion is a big part of the iconography of British royalty. It started with Richard the Lionheart, but it continues to be part of the like British royal family coat of arms. A lion is often seen as sort of synonymous with the idea of like the noble Britain or whatever. So the fact that he is the King Arthur character and he gets the lion makes a lot of sense. Meanwhile, Darkstorm gets the totem of the mollusk for his, quote, incredible climbing skill and general sliminess. The mollusk
it's not like a real animal, though. It's like every mollusk in one.
Yeah, it's just a category. I couldn't pick one. I think maybe snail was too close to armadillo, so they want to say snail, but they don't want to say snail.
Yeah. It's the only one that's a phyla instead of a species, is what I noted. Like right. One guy could have gotten vertebrates, and that would have been awesome because he would have been all vertebrates.
And one person's bacteria. Yeah. Excellent. That is we're now repitching this as an early 90s educational Captain Planet style show where it's like every episode has a 90-second segment at the end where they teach you something like overtly like educational. The incredible climbing skill came because he fell down a well and then climbed back up it. So that's why he got called
I
out for his
swear
incredible
Merklin
climbing
was
skill.
on his phone the whole time and just glancing up every once in a while and just making note. Oh,
I-
climber. Okay.
Darkstorm, I do like that Darkstorm is like, he's the big bad guy, but he is not like the most powerful,
No.
treacherous, scary villain. Like, the show undercuts Darkstorm a
Yes.
lot. He is a silly kind of a character that everyone follows very reluctantly, and he constantly gets his ass handed to him and makes dumb decisions and stuff like that. So the fact that he's a mollusk, it fits for how they're trying to portray him on the show. Merklin says these animals are the magical representations of your true inner beings, but he also says that they are like emotions. They're powerful but difficult to control. This is, I think, more this is a bigger part of the comic book series, is like that they kind of have to fight animal instincts when they turn into their animal selves. But there's going to be a later plot where Leoric is sort of trapped as a lion. And this comes into play there. I always call, again, born in 1987, I tie it into Animorphs.
I was going to say,
was one of my favorite.
I've never read Animorphs, but from what I understand, Animorphs, they get sort of trapped in the...
Yeah. So the Animorphs, it's these like teenagers who get alien technology that allow them to shift into different animals. They have to share their brain with the animal brain. So if you have an animal, like if you turn into a rabbit, you are just going to be flooded with anxiety and you're going to be skittish and scared of everything because you have that rabbit fear. Meanwhile, if you turn into an intelligent animal, you might realize like, oh, actually, this isn't all that different from being a human. But yeah, they will get trapped as animals if they're there for more than 2 hours. But a lot of the times, what you do is, at least early on in the series, before the lore got more complicated, to be like they turn into these animals for the first time, and then there's like a scary moment where it's like so and so's a tiger, and we all have to run from the tiger because they lost control of themselves. They're a tiger and they're chasing us, and then we're like, no, Jake, come back, and Jake's like, okay, never mind, I'm Jake, I'm not a tiger. So it's got a little bit of Animorph rules. In fact, that episode later where Leoric gets trapped as a lion has explicitly Animorph rules. It's longer than 2 hours, but there's like a time limit where if he's not turned back, he will be trapped as a lion forever. So there we go. K.A. Applegate, huge Visionaries fan. You heard it here first. Then we get to like the real toy shit. Like all of these people, no one would design these characters if they were just designing a cartoon because they're all ugly and they have the same silhouette, and that's just a nightmare for animation. But because they have to look like action figures, it's just like, oh yeah, all these people, they just look like action figures. This is where we really get to like, by the way, there's more fucking bullshit toys we're going to sell you. Some of them have staves, and if they dip their staffs into the magical mana pool, they'll see a wondrous transformation. And then some of the characters are like, well, what about those who have no staff? In time, you will discover your great powers, which is just absolutely them telling the audience, hey, accessories sold separately.
Yep.
Like, we're going to sell you more shit for these guys. You know, we haven't decided yet what cool vehicle that this character is going to get, but like that's where the money is we sell you these little G.I. Joes for cheap, but then for $40 you have to buy the big airplane or whatever. So this is again like the part where if you're trying to suspend your belief and watch this as a television show, you start getting very annoyed at the fact that you're like, God damn it, that's right, this is a toy commercial. Now, the staffs for the Knights of the Magical Light are charged with wisdom, light speed, knowledge, and strength. I forget who gets what.
Leoric gets wisdom. Cryotech is strength. Witterquick is speed. Arzon is knowledge. And I'm just like, Arzon getting knowledge over wisdom. Throughout the series, wisdom fucking sucks, and you wish you had knowledge instead. Because knowledge just, you say, hey, what should I do here, knowledge? And knowledge goes, oh, happy you asked. Here's the thing you do. Hey, wisdom, what should I do here? I'm going to give you a poem and then disappear. And it's like man, I would just be so upset. And they even mention it during the show. They're like, Leoric, your wisdom owl kind of fucking sucks, doesn't he?
It's a dead stat. Sometimes you play an RPG and you're like, oh, actually, that stat doesn't really matter in this game.
Yeah, like when the first time I, as an adult, played an RPG and my friends told me I could be a centaur. And then later we found out centaurs can't walk downstairs.
This is like that. But I you know what? I think all of these staffs are just more like these could have been tied in. Number one, these could have been tied into their animals because these are just extensions. Yeah. They don't feel like separate things. It's like he turns into a bear and gets strong, or he uses his strength staff to get strong. You know what I mean? Like these didn't need to be two separate things, but you want your action figure to hold something. And then this is where we get to the actual bullshit. Oh, actually, real quick, I should just say Darkling Lord staffs, they're charged with decay, destruction, fear, and invulnerability. These are all their, if you've ever played a multiplayer game like an Apex Legends or whatever, these are all their ults that they charge up and can use once an episode.
And these are the things
you can make a good team-based hero shooter out of Visionaries. If we're not going to do the He-Man reboot version, we can do the live game version where you buy different cosmetics for your dumb armor, and everyone has their different special powers as they fight in these arenas.
And one thing I forgot before this rewatch is that they need Merklin's power to recharge the staves and later vehicles, but not their own totems. So at a certain point, you start to wonder why they're even bothering with the staves.
Yeah. Also, it's like, it's kind of, how often can they use these totems and staffs? It's like, well, it depends on who's telling the story.
It's supposed to be like once, and then you have to go back to Merklin, but then, yeah.
And that's classic superhero stuff. That's the whole genre, is it's like, Superman can do this, and it doesn't hurt. But then sometimes when Superman does this, it does hurt.
Yeah.
You know? Just depends on what you need for the story. But this is the point where I'm like, these are shitty toys, because, like, make these swords.
Yeah.
Make one of them have an axe, one of them have a pitchfork, one of them have a spear, one of them have a sword, and give the special powers to the swords, to the weapons. Like, the fact that they're carrying staffs this whole show is so weird and clunky. It's like you have all of these stories that you have to tell, and the entire time, half of your characters are holding these, like, giant 9-foot staffs. It's so just, like, weird. I remember, like, being a kid, and you would see, like, if you would see like a thing about Civil War, and you'd be like, oh yeah, and here are the people marching, in their regiment to the battle, and you see the people in the front who have like the drums and the flags and stuff, and you're like, oh, that's a shitty job. I don't want to be that person. I'm just walking to my death with no way to defend myself. The staffs obviously are technically weapons, but they just remind me of like the guy holding the banner.
Or like in a samurai movie too, that samurai banner.
Yeah, in like the big battle scene, it's like they're the guys holding the banner, which is like, that's not the guy I want to pretend to be. That's not my fantasy. No. So this is why I know for a fact that if I was a child and someone tried to pitch me on these Visionary toys, and they'd be like, look at these holographic stickers, I'd be like, why don't they have swords? Like, what is this? Why are they holding signs? Are they at a protest? Like, what's happening? So I really think like this is the icing on the cake as far as bad character design. I think these staves are stupid, and I think they should have all had like cool weapons, or just tie all of this, like just simplify it and tie all of the magic to the totems.
Well, and you'll notice that neither of the girls get a staff or a vehicle because they never made toys of either of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're low priority. Look, it's one of these things where it's like, those weren't going to sell, so we need to know this is a hit before we invest money in the less marketable women's toys. Like you said, they have to, every time they use, they go weaker, so they have to recharge them. That kind of gets dropped by the end of this series. They're not really going back to Merklin to recharge their staffs very often. And then Merklin's sort of like, Merklin is this sort of agent of chaos, and he's just kind of like, well, I've given you all these powers to totally, rule the world. You have magic in a world where no one has technology, and you're the only people with magic. We later learned there are some other magical people outside of the world of Merklin and these knights, but for the moment, these are all the magic in the world. And then he's just kind of like, all right, do your thing, I guess. Darkstorm complains that they have to walk back out the way they came in, and he's like, actually, I think I have an exit method that you will especially appreciate. And he uses his magical orb to flood the room with water and flush them down a hole. That is a shit joke. He says, he's basically saying, I think you're going to appreciate it, Darkstorm, because you're a piece of shit, and I'm going to flush you down this toilet. Yeah. They all get like spit out a gargoyle statue mouth in the front of the mountain. They're about to fight, and then Darkstorm says, no. We should stop fighting. We should only use our powers for peace. Everyone is skeptical that Darkstorm is the one saying this, but they're like, yeah, no, I agree. We should use our for peace. Darkstorm's followers question why he called for peace, and Darkstorm says that Leoric is honor bound to follow the agreement, while he, being evil, has no such honor. And then he says, it is so much easier being evil. Because it's a show for children. Yeah. It's, if you're like, oh, this is a show about different ideologies and a battle between, different visions of how society should be ruled. It's like, no. This is a show for children. And some of them are just plain evil. And you would think this is the end of the episode, but they're sort of setting up a cliffhanger for episode 2. So we follow Arzon. He's sort of walking away. He hears a woman crying for help. He rushes and he finds in a little pit this princess in a pink gown, and she has like a classic princess cone hat kind of a thing. I don't know what you call those or what era those are from, but they're like the giant cone hats that have the little like silk lace at the top of them. Classic medieval princess look. He comes to save her, and she asks about his power staff, and he says it's magic, and she says that she doesn't believe it. He says he'll prove it, and he delivers the first magical poem of the series. Now, when they use their staffs in order to activate it, they have to sort of speak magical words that always come in the form of these like very rudimentary poems. I don't know if it's in the cartoon or just in the comic, but the idea is that like the staff is sort of telling them what to say. Like they don't necessarily, they're not trained in magic. They don't necessarily know the magic words, but just holding this power, it kind of just like occurs to them that they should say this poem, and that's how it will work. So Arzon says, "A whim, a thought, and more is sought. Awake my mind, thy will be wrought." And then the figure on his staff appears, and it is like Jim Kelly. I said there are no black people on this show. I forgot about the bearer of knowledge who looks just like Jim Kelly.
I think it's supposed to be a giant brain, but it does look like an afro.
It's a total afro, and he's got like kind of a headband too.
Yeah.
So he has this like very muscular look, like he's shirtless. So he definitely just looks like a like athletic guy with an afro. So in my mind, this is like a martial arts blaxploitation character. He doesn't speak like Jim Kelly. He doesn't have like a 80s cartoon black voice. He has kind of a raspy voice. I think he kind of sounds like Jafar when Jafar's disguised like the old man when him and Aladdin are in jail. And it warns him that the princess is in fact Virolina. And Arzon says that's absurd. But then as he's saying that, Virolina behind him pulls off her princess disguise, which is like full-blown Mission Impossible
like face
mask,
wig.
It's not like magic. It all tears off her.
It's not magic.
It's... She didn't get the power. Like she doesn't have the staff of disguise or anything like that.
She should have been like the chameleon or something, because she does this more than once throughout the show, where she disguises herself.
But you have to understand, at one point she was in water, so she's a shark. It's like, did she carry all this disguise with her to the mountain?
It was over her uniform too, so she must have been a very buff princess that we just didn't notice.
Like the way we saw this before, like the previous scene is the Darkling Lords go one way, and then the Knights of the Magical Light. They're not called this yet, but by the end of the second episode, we will know them as the Knights of the Magical Light, the good guys. They go the other. So she had to probably like circle back and run around and throw on this disguise because she just happened to know that Arzon was going to be there. And her big plan was to get close to him. My assumption is she doesn't get a staff, so she's going to steal his staff.
Yeah,
and so that's why she's like asking leading questions about it or whatever. I feel like seduce him.
No, but I think that's there because they keep talking about his quote powerful staff. I think that there's clearly supposed to be a double entendre.
We get a little bit horny later on in the show. Leoric gets a girlfriend who is half his age, but Virolina is sort of flirting with him a little to disarm him before she takes the staff. And then we get a freeze frame, a to be continued, which I'm sure at this point in the 80s was a common thing for viewers of cartoons, this kind of action cartoon to watch, was to see, oh, this is going to be a multi-part thing. That was rarer in the 90s when I was watching cartoons, though Batman the Animated Series had a fair number of to be continued endings.
Yeah, Justice League for the first couple seasons had two-parters the whole time.
Oh, yeah, for sure. They grew to understand that like kids could follow serialized plots, and in fact that was appealing to them. And then of course like that is like a lesson they learn very hard when all Western animation goes away and it just becomes the anime show. Like it's just like every cartoon block is just Yu-Gi-Oh and things like Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yeah, and if you miss one, you're fucking screwed. I learned that as an adult with Toonami played during my lunch break, and I would try to watch. I would miss one Dragon Ball Z, and I would be
I'm like, Gundam Wing, this seems awesome. And then 4 minutes later, I'm like, I don't know what's happening. I'm going to change the channel to Comedy Central now. Yeah. But anyway, that is the first episode of Visionaries. And now that we've introduced all the characters and we know all their magical powers, Gabe, do you want to introduce the actors who play all these characters?
Yeah, I'll go through them. Leoric, the leader, is Neil Ross. He is still working, but he's mostly known as a narrator or announcer, which makes sense given his very boring voice. He's done cartoons, he's done game shows and video games. He's done a whole bunch of Nova documentary specials. He did the Emmy Awards a couple times, and then he has this very long series of Playboy video specials that he narrated.
So you're telling me there's like somewhere out there there's a videotape of like a sexy blonde 20-something by a pool, topless, and you get to hear Leoric be like, look, she loves going skiing, hiking, and animals.
You're honestly making him sound like he has more range than he does, Patrick. Your impression, Leoric is, oh, no. Like, oh, that's terrible. Like, he almost has like a Cosell, like not the voice. Cosell is also it's too much character. He has the rhythm of Cosell, but not the voice. He is...
This is the thing I was talking about before, where like all the performances are very
his
flat.
is especially flat. Ektar is Michael McConaughey, and he's one of the few guys here that is primarily known for anime dubs and video games, and he is continuing to work. And so he was actually not working that much at the time, but he's done Overwatch, Street Fighter, World of Warcraft, Resident Evil, Hunter x Hunter, Blue Exorcist, Bleach, Mortal Kombat, EverQuest, Naruto. He was on Avatar: The Last Airbender. He was on two of the best Japanese anime shows, Paranoia Agent and Cowboy Bebop, not as regulars but as characters. He was the narrator on the Harmony Gold dubs of Dragon Ball, and he worked on some of the original dubs of Akira that we don't like. I think those might have been preserved for the Blu-ray, but they were re-recorded at some point. Farrell is voiced by Bo Weaver. Bo Weaver? I never said it out loud. It's a funny name. He worked on several cartoons in smaller guest star capacities, and he is also more known as an announcer and narrator. And his voice is supposed to sound younger, as we were saying before. Cryotech is Bernard Ehrhard. He, again, a lot of small roles, but his big one that I always remember is he was Psykill on GoBots, and I only remember that because Psykill was such a great name.
It's pretty good.
Witterquick is our first big star, Jim Cummings.
Hell yeah.
And so Witterquick is like Jim Cummings' like younger guy voice that he does. And he's still working regularly. He is now currently the official Tigger and Pooh Bear. He is the official Tasmanian Devil. When we were younger, he was Darkwing Duck and Pete, Goofy's shitty neighbor on Goof Troop and a Goofy movie. He took over the Yosemite Sam as the official Yosemite Sam, and at some point he became the official Shredder. I think that what's his name from Fresh Prince left that show at some point.
Yeah, Uncle Phil
left at some point and he took over. And he was the Savage Dragon on the Unlikely USA cartoon version of that comic book, which is another thing I watched again as an adult and is slightly better than you would assume it would be.
Stay tuned for season 2 of Wizard Jail on Savage Dragon.
Savage Dragon. Unfortunately, Savage Dragon has literally hundreds of comics, so you would have to, you would be screwed. Maybe if you only...
Never mind. For me, Jim Cummings, whenever I hear a voice on a show from the 90s and I'm like, is that Jim Cummings? The way I orient myself is go, I'll have your head for a trophy, street rat. Because I watched Aladdin a million times and he plays like the chief guard in Aladdin. Yeah. And that, I mean, him on as Pete and Goof Troop in a Goofy movie is definitely like, that's like the classic Jim Cummings voice in my mind. But obviously, like you said, he can do like all the different classic cartoon characters.
Darkwing Duck is kind of just his default voice too.
And Witterquick is not.
No, you wouldn't guess.
When you think about that, like deep, raspy sort of a thing, Witterquick is supposed to be like a little bit more younger and energetic. So this is him outside of his sort of default voice.
Witterquick can be told apart visually because his helmet looks more like a, I think it's not a lacrosse helmet. It's like a motocross helmet instead of it goes over his mouth. I think he's the only Spectral Knight that has his mouth covered, and he's the only blonde. All the rest are brunettes. you know, if you wanted to, he's the red one too. I had a toy of him. He was one of the toys I had. Okay, Arzon is Hal Rail. This is another workhorse of the 80s and 90s. He was on Ewok Adventures, Snorks, which is another show I watched on reruns on Sundays. Transformers, Batman the Animated Series, Toxic Crusaders, various Disney shows. He took over Raphael on the original Ninja Turtles when Rob Paulson quit. He was on Tiny Toons, which I just realized in my notes I misspelled Tony Toons, which is a different show. He is the uncredited voice of the Predator on Predator 2.
Oh, interesting.
And he was the uncredited voice of various Ghoulies in Ghoulies 2.
So he was also just like an all-purpose like creature
right.
mutterer.
So I'm guessing he got the jobs that what's the other guy who does all the creature jobs? He was
Oh yeah. I can't remember his name at the moment. I know exactly what you're talking about.
He was is he the I can't remember his name. He's still
I'm going to look up the cast of Pocahontas because that's the one that comes to mind. He does all the animals in Pocahontas.
He was I think he was the villain. I think he was Megatron.
Frank Welker is who we're thinking of.
If Frank Welker wasn't available, apparently you got Hal Rail. Galadriel and a lot of basically half the female cast and background characters is Susan Blue. She's from St. Paul, Minnesota. She is a casting director and voice actress. If there was a girl-aimed show or a boy-aimed show with a token woman, she was usually there. She was on Gem, My Little Pony. She was RC on the Transformers. She did a lot of supporting roles on G.I. Joe and Real Ghostbusters. She was not Janine. She was live action, and she is Miss Shepherd in Friday the 13th, The New Blood. I cannot remember who Miss Shepherd is. It might be
I think it's like maybe like the adult chaperone of all those college kids or something like that. So
she's in live action. And I assume that Galadriel is a reference to Galadriel of Lord of the Rings, because there's other stuff that references Lord of the Rings. Before it was cool. You know, the most uncool time, the late 80s. Lord of the Rings was cool when it came out. It was cool again with hippies in the 60s, and then it was cool again in the early 2000s when there was movies.
You're right. We are in the pit of Lord of the Rings, and it might never be that uncool again. It might have just be a permanent part of pop culture at this point.
Yeah, there's the Amazon show. No, that does. The mediocre Amazon show that I watch and that I think other people watch, so it's just going to remain in the pop culture even. Anyway.
It cost $1 billion.
Yeah, they have to put it out. It cost a country's GDP.
They wrote a check and they just wrote in the amount. They just put a $sign and then wrote Texas.
Yeah.
it's like unbelievable.
Yeah. Oh god. Okay, so then the Darkling Lords. Darkstorm is voiced by Chris Latta. This is not a Chris Latta voice. He also voices Kravex. Kravex is a Chris Latta voice. Chris Latta is mostly known for screaming. He was Starscream. He was Cobra Commander. He was Rasp on the Dino Riders. He's Decompose in the Inhumanoids, and he's Dr. Claw in the original Inspector Gadget. So that's less of a scream. And he was a guy who did shit to his throat that he probably can't speak anymore these days. But you know, Kravex is a character who's screaming every time he speaks, which is the perfect Chris Latta thing. He just sounds like Cobra Commander. I can do an impression of it. We've been talking for a while. I would make myself hurt. And I think it's why Kravex is my favorite character, because he is constantly fucking angry. And I just think it's funny to have this one guy who we know can beat Leoric in a fight. That's a spoiler for later. But this guy who's a genuine tough guy who beats up everybody and is constantly annoyed and always screaming. And something very funny happens in a later episode with him. And he's my favorite. But he also does Darkstorm in like his more regal voice, which is not what's usually connected to Chris Latta. Sindar is Peter Cullen, who is our third big name. Peter Cullen was actually the official Eeyore. I don't know if he is still, but he is best known as the voice of
Optimus Prime.
To this day. He's got to be 1 million years old by now, but he still voices
Optimus Prime.
This is a fun, stupid fact. He was on both Ghostbusters and The Real Ghostbusters, and he was on both GoBots and Transformers. So he
universal donor.
Yeah. We think of the GoBots and Ghostbusters as being knockoffs, but they actually came first by just a little bit. and he does his dope voice because Sindar is one of the only. His characteristic is he's an idiot, and he likes animals, and his.
Is he the one who likes to eat too?
Yeah, and
when they're all tied up on the ceiling, he goes, "Do you have good food at your castle?" And Darkstorm's like, "Yep," and he's like, "All right, I'm in."
And I think that they say that he was a construction worker before the. This is one of these things that keeps happening where I don't think that much time has passed since the Age of Magic started, because little hints will come up that these guys who are not that old had jobs during the time of.
Yeah. That is a very fun post-apocalyptic trope that this show does not do a lot with it. There is a really good episode later that is about like the old days of when one of them was a police detective. But like for the most part, we don't get a lot of backstory as to what they were before the fall. But I really like the recent memory apocalypse sort of a thing. Tom Petty showing up in the Postman kind of factor.
Yeah, you were famous, weren't you? I was in a different life.
So this is, I think maybe we get a little bit more of that with just like the general citizens of New Valeric and stuff like that, where they're very eager to sort of go back to their old ways, or they are just so dumb that they don't understand the fact that they have not adjusted to this post-apocalyptic life. They're not like, oh, well, we're farmers now. That's the way we have to live. Like, they're very much like, no, we can have our life of luxury and conspicuous consumption still, is sort of like an indication that that not much time has passed since those 3 suns lined up and all technology stopped working.
And his power staff destruction is clearly the best power staff. It is the most powerful and it does the most stuff. But the fact that he likes animals comes up quite a bit. Virulina is Jennifer Darling, who is the other woman who is on all these shows as a they got the 2 ladies basically that are on all these shows, but she does Dragons, GoBots, Snorks, Centurions, G.I. Joe, Disney shows. Interestingly enough, she is one of the voices on some of the Pixar Ghibli redubs, which are pretty good redubs. I don't know which character she does exactly because she gets sort of like additional characters in her credit. She is the voice of the computer in Demolition Man. And then she's the voice of Irma, the nerdy assistant on Ninja Turtles, the other girl on Ninja Turtles.
Oh, classic. Yeah, that's the one I would know.
Mortrid is probably our only actor here who's famous outside of cartoons. It's Jonathan Harris. He was Dr. Zachariah Smith on Lost in Space. And basically every character he's played since has been a variation on Dr. Smith. He was the main villain on Rainbow Bright. He was working into the 90s on Freakazoid and Darkwing Duck and Spider-Man. And then Lexor is Michael McConaughey again. The narrator is Malachi Thorne, who only really does that first episode.
Yeah, that narration doesn't really come back.
It really should have been Merklin. But that he does have, he was a sitcom actor who was on multiple generations of both Star Trek, and then he was on Babylon 5 too. And then lastly for the purposes of this, Merklin was Roscoe Lee Brown, who is another recognizable actor. He is a black man, so there is a black man as 2 characters, because he also voices Recon, who sounds way too much like Merklin when they're talking to each other. It's kind of funny. But he was on Mannix, All in the Family. He was in the John Wayne Western, The Cowboys, the original Logan's Run. I personally remember him from The Cosby Show. He was a regular on Soap. He did a lot of real Ghostbusters voices. He did voices on Pirates of Darkwater and Batman. He is the narrator for the movie Babe. I think he was Mr. Arrow on Treasure Planet, but I think the thing I actually remember him for the most is he was Kingpin on the Spider-Man cartoon for like 35 episodes. Maybe Recon is supposed to be black, like his. I don't know.
Let's check back in on that as throughout the series. Let's see. Is Recon black yet? We'll do is Recon black yet update every episode.
His hair is. I think maybe he is. I'd never thought of this until this moment, Patrick.
This is a line of questioning that gets very dangerous very quickly.
You're right. But I wonder
the racial investigation into these cartoon characters maybe doesn't need to happen.
Okay, you're probably right. But I'm like,
maybe Recon's black.
Yeah. But yeah. So but
if Skeeter is black, why not Recon?
Yeah.
Skeeter's black, right? From Doug?
The blue guy? Yeah, I think so. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Anyway. Visionaries. That is the first episode. That is the first episode of Wizard Jail. Where does the name Wizard Jail come from? Oh, you'll find out later.
Get it. You'll get it.
It is a direct reference. Right now, we are just in the jail that, it's also a Foucault sort of a thing where it's like everything is a prison. All societies are different forms of prisons. Right. And all of our visionaries have found themselves in a wizard jail of their own because with great power comes great responsibility and expectations. Anyway, that is the first episode here. Not a great episode of the series. It has some really good animation because they are just sort of like, hey, let's show off at the beginning. Yeah. I feel like the next couple episodes, that animation quality might dip just a bit. Or it's possible that it's just the stories get so disjointed that I kind of like lose track of things. But this is a show that is going to have a lot of big battle scenes between 12 identical looking characters. So that is going to suffer a little bit once we get into that sort of a thing. And they're not these little like siloed off vignettes that we had in this episode. But thank you for joining us. Now, Gabe, there's one last thing that you suggested, and I don't know if you remembered this.
Oh, yeah, that we needed our own. I never did this.
The same way that that the Visionaries must use magical words with their staffs, these magical poems that they use to activate their powers, we were going to sign off every episode with some magical words of our own. I have mine.
Oh, okay, well, we'll just pretend that I knew about yours and signed off on it and helped you write it.
Okay. So here it is. Do you have real quick? This is gonna be the ending of the show. Do you have anything else to say?
No,
at this point?
just that this episode is gonna. I'm looking at our thing. We're already at 2 hours and 25 minutes. Hopefully, I can get this below 2 hours in the edit. The other episodes will not be this long. This just required a lot.
That's right. There's a lot of detail. We're gonna aim for something closer to like around an hour for the next episodes. But until next time, Medusa's stare, Siren's voice. Please rate and review on your podcatcher of choice.